You're listening to the Prepping Academy podcast. This is Patrick with Grid Down Comms Up, in for another episode. Got a few things I want to tell you guys about before we get started. First, next month, I will be at the Eastern Tennessee Homestead Alliance Festival in Knoxville, Tennessee. It is on Friday, September 12th and Saturday, September 13th. It is an awesome event, family-friendly, and they will have guest speakers on all sorts of topics, from butchering livestock to preserving food, bushcraft fire, all kinds of really, really cool stuff. If you're into homesteading, you're into preparedness and self-sufficiency, I encourage you to come check it out if you are in the Knoxville, North Carolina, East Tennessee, any of the surrounding areas. Also want to tell you guys that they have been gracious enough to give me a 10% off discount code to share with you. If you use the discount code GRID10, that is GRID 10, all caps for the grid, before September 1st, you can get 10% off your general admission passes. If you're in the area, you want to come out, check it out. Again, great event. I'll be speaking on communications lessons that we learned during Hurricane Helene and how that you can better equip your family and your community to communicate when a natural disaster strikes. Speaking of natural disasters, our topic for today is going to be the top 10 items that you need to survive a natural disaster. Ran this topic by a couple friends of mine. We hashed it out a little bit, came up with the 10 essentials that you need in order to survive a natural disaster. Probably going to break this one into 2 episodes. We'll do the most important through number 5 today and pick up 5 or 6 through 10 on our next episode. Want to also remind you guys that you can check out some of my videos, communications related stuff, over at my YouTube channel at Grid Down Comms Up. I'll also be posting some of these podcasts in addition to some podcasts with some slides added and some other teaching tools eventually, as I pull a bunch of the content that I've created for Heritage Life Skills, the Eastern Tennessee Homestead Alliance Festival, preparedness Bug Out Camp, and other events over the years, and turn those into videos to get that information out there to more people, and give me a way to kind of go through some of the things I've done in the past, share that with the audience here. So now, let's get right to it with the top 5 natural disaster preps. 5 things that you need to get through a natural disaster. We'll do the next 5 in the next episode. So first up, pretty universal to everybody, is potable water. Water that you can drink. And a lot of us, we have water filters. We have our tabletop, Berkey, whatever style water filters. We have our Life straws. We have our Catalin filters. We have all of these water filters for filtering water that are typically targeted towards folks who are maybe backcountry travelers, adventurers, those sorts of things that filter out most of the common pathogens that we would find in water. And those are a okay place to start, but we also need to have water on hand, because after a lot of natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, anything that disrupts the ground and disrupts water filtration systems and waste decontamination or processing facilities puts a lot of things into the water that we don't want to drink. We rewind a few years and we look at the Palestine, Ohio train wreck and chemical spill. A lot of stuff went into the water we don't want to drink. And a lot of that stuff is not filterable by our typical water filters that most of us have. So we need to have some stored water to get us by until we can come up with a better solution. After Hurricane Helene, last November, there were people who were not even near or I won't say not near, but we're not directly impacted by the flooding, but we're in counties that the river flooded and it damaged the waste filtration facilities and it damaged the water collection and water filtration facilities, causing them to issue boil water alerts or sometimes just don't drink the water alerts because of all of the toxic stuff that got washed into the river subsequently ended up in the water supply. So make sure that you have a solution for water filtration and stored water. There's a lot of discussion on how much water do you need per day. Well, that's a topic for a different podcast, but it's a lot more than you think. And plan that when you're dealing with a natural disaster, you're going to need water for a couple very specific items. First, you're going to need water to drink. That's the obvious one. But second, you're going to need water to cook with. And in a natural disaster, a lot of times we're eating things that are fast to cook, and we'll get to that in a minute. And the other thing we're going to need water for is sanitation and cleaning. If we've had floods, if we've had other disruptive tornado things, if you're not directly impacted or you're partially impacted by it, things are dirty, you've got to be able to clean up the dirt and the bad stuff in order to protect your health and the health of those around you. And you need water to do that. Also, if you go out and spend all day working hard, clearing debris, mucking out stuff, doing all that kind of things, you're going to be nasty at the end of the day. You're going to be really nasty, and you're going to want to be able to clean that nast and funk off so that you can feel clean and stay healthy, because that kind of stuff, it'll make you sick. Again, it's contaminated. A lot of it's toxic. Now, we've kind of covered you need water, and this is kind of why you need water. Let's talk about food. Everybody's got to eat. And when you're doing cleanup after a natural disaster, you're going to burn a lot of calories because you're going to be working a lot harder than you work on a day-to-day basis. And that means, number 2, food. You got to have food. It also needs to be easy to fix food because you're going to be busy working. You're going to be clearing debris. You're going to be repairing structures. You're going to be helping maybe family and friends. You're going to be doing a lot of other things that keep us from eating the traditional beans and rice and beans that preppers are famous for. Those are great. They take a while to cook. They take energy and fuel to cook. And in a long-term scenario, that's fine. We can cook and we can do that. But when I need something right now that I can boil some water or heat up real quick, grab some food and get back to work, freeze-dried foods, your Mountain Houses, your Legacy, your Thrives, your own homemade freeze-dried food, if you go that route, all of those things are quick to eat. Canned stuff. Pop open a can of beans and a can of canned chicken and, make yourself a little Mexican something and have that for dinner and just warm it up in a skillet over the camp stove. Those sorts of things are the foods that you need to think about in a natural disaster because you're busy. You're not going to have time to sit down and tend to boiling water and boiling beans and keeping a fire going and all that stuff that we think about maybe in a longer term situation. So make sure at least some of your food supply is the freeze-dried, the instant meal, the backpack type food, and a good pantry of canned supplies for a few weeks. The kind of thing pushed by ready.gov is have 72 hours of food, have 2 weeks of food and water, those sorts of things, because as we learned and we see over and over in a lot of larger scale disasters like Hurricane Helene, like when Puerto Rico got hit by a hurricane, all these things, it takes a minute to get to the location you're in sometimes. So be prepared, be ready. Don't don't stress, but have some stuff. Be a good prepper and have food. Next, item number 3 on our hot list. Item number 3 is near and dear to my heart. Normally, we're talking about communications on this podcast. Well, you didn't think you were going to get out of that today, did you? We're going to talk communications for just a minute. You need some form of communications. When Spain experienced a blackout a few months ago, when Hurricane Helene hit western North Carolina, when various other disasters have happened in and around the modern world, our traditional, very grid-dependent, very fragile communication systems tend to stop working. And it's gotten worse now that everyone has a cell phone in their pocket, because that's where they get all of their information. And when that device stops working, they no longer have any information about what's going on around them. When Spain experienced the blackout, one of the most in-demand items out there was a battery-powered AM/FM radio, so they could listen to a radio station and find out some information about what was going on. And 15 years ago, 20 years ago, everybody owned a battery-powered Walkman or a little portable transistor radio or a clock radio on their nightstand that had a 9-volt battery backup in the bottom of it, or something like that. People had a way to listen to the radio other than in their car. Because in Hurricane Helene, depending on where you were, your car probably got washed down the river. In Spain, a lot of urban areas, especially in Europe, not everybody's got a car. So, or if a tornado just hit, maybe there's a tree laying on your car. So having something small, something portable where you can turn on a local radio station, find out what's going on in your area. Maybe it's find out where you can go to get food and water if you need some more food and water, if yours got damaged or something happened. If you don't have a house left, where can I go seek shelter in a potentially very dangerous environment? That kind of information likely will be available on the radio, assuming radio stations are still on the air, which in a natural disaster, you're probably going to be able to find something with some information on it. So those are things to consider with communications, just on the simple side, the really obvious side, as well as having a NOAA weather radio. If you have a Baofeng or something like that, you can listen to NOAA weather radio on one of the 162 megahertz NOAA channels, or if you've got the little NOAA alert radio, you can listen there, because if it's a storm, if it's a hurricane, if it's something like that, and a lot of the cell phone maybe stops working, something's going on, and maybe you can hear something on the NOAA radio about what's going on with the weather. Every tool you have, everything you can check, continues on. Now, of course, Starlink comes up in this conversation, because a lot of people in the prepping world now, they want to think they're pushing the easy button and go, I'm going to get a Starlink, and then I don't have to worry about any of this other complicated communication stuff. Don't get me wrong, Starlink's awesome. Starlink for disasters has changed the way that we function. But it's not always going to work. In fact, as I speak right now, in the last month, there's been 2 Starlink outages. So it's not as robust as we maybe think that it is, would like to think that it is, but it is, an excellent tool. So Starlink, yeah, okay. That's cool. That's good to get information from. Understand, as we talk about this, during Hurricane Helene, Starlink was offline for a number of hours right after the event happened because there was an uplink station in western North Carolina that was damaged, or the transport was damaged. Something was damaged. It was offline, and they had to kind of reorganize how some aspects of Starlink worked in order to get communications back going. And I know Starlink is supposed to be fixing that in the future, so that's not as much of an issue, but it is something to consider. And then, a couple weeks ago, Starlink was out for a few hours. So you never know what might be the situation or the disaster or the emergency, and whether Starlink is, an option. Plus, you have to consider that if you're using Starlink as your everyday use internet, that your dish is going to be outside. And I don't know what speed wind that a Starlink dish is rated at, but I can assure you it's not rated for an oak limb or a tree falling on it. In the situation, your Starlink may not survive. So if you got a backup Starlink, something else to consider. As we look at communications, those are the ways to get information. There's also, for those of us who are into the radio communications realm, there's all kinds of free radio services, the FRS, the Muir CB, that kind of thing. I don't want to give too much away on the discussion that I'm going to have at the Homestead Alliance Festival, but one of those played a very large role in a lot of communities communicating. Then there's amateur radio options from, like I said, HF and then the VHF line of sight type communications that could be considered as you layer on your communications and understand what you need to communicate, in what type of natural disaster, because it's going to vary. If it's a hurricane that puts several 100-mile by several 100-mile wide swath of the country or the coastline without a lot of communications and power, communicating from that's a lot different than a tornado that levels a couple of city blocks. Things to consider with communications. Next, medical. So many preppers do not have medical, or have medical the way they need it. And when I say that, I mean, lots of folks have bought a med pack. Maybe they got an IFAK or a blowout kit for gunshot wound. They got the kit on their plate carrier. They're, ready to go. But they don't have the training that they need to know how to use that stuff. Plus, they may not have the training to deal with more prolonged care. And what I mean by this is, I'm going to use Hurricane Helene again here as a little bit of an example. Early on in the hurricane, you could not get a medevac or a casevac from western North Carolina unless you met very certain specific criteria. And a lot of people were shocked at those criteria, but they were designed, there was limited access, there was a certain inherent danger with doing the medevac or casevac. There were a lot of things that prevented them from responding to every emergency, and there were a lot of emergencies. But if you had a broken bone, you probably weren't getting airlifted out, not immediately anyway. If you were in cardiac arrest, you weren't getting airlifted out because they can't treat you while you're in the airplane or the helicopter, in most cases. So they weren't going to send a helicopter to pick somebody up that probably wasn't going to survive. But also, a lot of lesser injuries you need to know how to treat. You need to know how to treat those over a longer period of time. If you do have a critical bleed, like, say you cut your leg with a chainsaw, it still may be hours before you get casevac'd. So you need to know how to stop the person from bleeding out. You need to know how to stabilize them, and then you need to know how to prepare them for transport. So 8 hours later, when that helicopter finally gets there, you can get them loaded up and get them to the hospital. So medical is important. Another aspect of medical is dealing with a lot of maybe unexpected things, from exhaustion, sprains, overexertion because we are doing physical work that we don't typically do, electrolyte imbalances, all kinds of stuff that pop up when people that normally work a desk job or, do lighter work on a day-to-day basis, go out and start trying to move big trees and shovel out dirt or shovel out snow or those sorts of things. Every year you hear people have heart attacks during winter when it starts snowing because they're not used to shoveling snow. And, snow's heavy. Water's 8 pounds a gallon. I don't know how that equates to, big shovelfuls of snow, but people overexert, and then they have a medical situation that is because of that. So those are, some of the medical stuff that you need to be prepared for, more than just your, somebody got, an extra hole in them and we need to stabilize them till the ambulance gets here and send them off. So having those sorts of things, having stuff to treat GI issues. Again, we talked earlier about potable water and food. Well, sometimes oopsies happen and you get something from water. You're also going to be eating food you don't normally eat. And a lot of people who have tried that for a prolonged period of time report gastrointestinal distress. We'll just use that term for that. And they need a little something to help with that. So make sure you've got some of the pink stuff or some of the whatever it is that you like for dealing with those sorts of things on hand and are ready to help you, your family, your neighbors, because during a natural disaster, your community becomes king. I get in the communications world, I get lots of questions about how do I communicate with somebody 400, 500, 600 miles away when the grid goes down. We're not going to get into that, but your community, when you're cut off from civilization because the road to your house is gone, or there's 200 trees down over a half mile and nobody's getting to you for maybe a week, you and your immediate people that are around you, whether you like them or not, whether they're part of your bug out group, whether they're part of your mag group, whether they're upstanding citizens, it doesn't matter. You're stuck with them. And you've got to be prepared to deal with that. And some of them might have medical issues, and you might be the only person there that knows enough to potentially save somebody's grandmother. So keep that in mind and get the medical training. Don't just go buy the gear. Get some medical training. Now, we're going to hit item number 5. And this one is one that gets left off of most people's list, and we're going to talk about this one for just a little bit. I want you to look out the window. Do you see more than 1 or 2 trees while you're looking around? Most of you probably do. If you do, then during most natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, you're going to have to deal with trees that are no longer standing upright. Tree fall down, go boom. Okay? Throughout all of these common disasters, you're going to have to deal with trees. And some of them are not going to be little. So, a chainsaw. It is, in the disaster preparedness world, you got to have a chainsaw. It's just is what it is. And not only do you need to have a chainsaw, you need to know how to use one. That's another thing. Chainsaw's not the most dangerous tool that we're going to use, but it's up there with hazards if you don't know how to use one. The other kind of part of that is, and it's not just the hazards of chainsaw kickback and, cutting your leg with the chainsaw and other things. It's also overexerting yourself, pulling muscles, injuring your back, doing a lot of stuff with a saw or with wood. Trees are heavy. A small tree even that's bent over from a hurricane or a tornado can store a ton of energy. A tree that's the diameter of your wrist that's bent over, if you cut it the wrong way and it smacks you in the shin, congratulations, you're going to get a Casevac trip to the hospital to probably have 2 metal rods put in your leg from potentially a compound fracture, because that kind of stuff happens when you get hit by a tree that is, under a lot of tension. So understanding how to safely do this stuff is of the utmost criticality when dealing with this. But we look at Hurricane Helene, we look at a tornado, we even look at a really bad spring thunderstorm. Okay, trees are laying across the road, trees laying across your driveway. Maybe like 10 or 15 trees are laying across the road in the driveway. And I remember watching a video from Hurricane Helene of some folks who were stuck at a campsite, and they didn't really, again, back to the whole communications thing, they really didn't know how much of western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee was affected. I think maybe they thought, like a lot of people, it's really bad here. It can't be that bad anywhere else, because most people are used to a tornado or something that's somewhat localized, and they can't fathom that like 5 states has massive destruction and chaos in them. They're walking down the road and there are trees down. They think they're big trees. They're really not all that big a tree, but they're, to somebody that doesn't have a decent sized saw and some know-how, it's a big tree. And they're going, we're stuck. There's like 12, 15 trees down. Most of them are, under 20 inches, but, they're blocking the road, and they're going, well, I guess we're going to be waiting till somebody gets here to clear the road and help us get out. What they don't realize is nobody's coming to help, because they're one area that's really, in all honesty, only moderately impacted. And it's going to be like weeks before somebody gets to there, maybe even longer. Fortunately, people in the area, again, your community, come out, help clear the road, and get things kind of straightened back up till at least you can sort of get through and, up the little mountain road with at least like a UTV or something like that to get supplies in or get somebody out. Having a chainsaw, and I'm going to talk a little more about that here too. Chainsaws. Where do I start with this? I once had someone tell me that they went through like 3 or 4 chainsaws during, I think it was maybe Hurricane Andrew in Florida. And I'm listening to this person talk, and I'm going, something's not right here, because chainsaws don't wear out that quick. At least they shouldn't wear out that quick. And all I can figure out from this is when either they didn't know how to properly take care of the saw, or 2, they were using very inexpensive homeowner saws. And if you're going to be prepared, if you're going to be ready for a natural disaster, most homeowner saws are designed to use for a few minutes every once in a while. And if you run them hours on end during the day, maybe there's bearings, there's all kinds of things in them, in plastic cases and all kinds of stuff that's just not designed to run continuously for hours and hours and hours on end during the day without failing. They're designed to run for 20 minutes, on Saturday while you're, pruning a tree, or maybe get used for 3 or 4 hours to clean up a downed tree once a year or something like that. They're not something that you're going to use every day for 2 weeks clearing trees with and expect to survive. So if you're serious about this and you're serious about getting a saw, get a pro saw. Get a saw that's designed for some serious use. And if you take care of it, if you never put ethanol fuel in it, you always run premium non-ethanol, properly mixed with good 2-cycle oil, and you keep it clean, you take care of it, it'll last you a lifetime. Have dependable tools. It's an investment. It's not cheap. You're going to spend probably somewhere in the $800 to well north of $1,000 for a good saw. But like I said, it's going to last you a lifetime. It's an investment in your future. And if you're a homesteader, If you live in the country, that kind of thing, then you're going to get plenty of use out of it. And if you heat with wood, same kind of thing. Have a chainsaw and have the accessories for it. You got to have fuel. Store some fuel that your saw can run and use. Store chainsaw bar oil. Store extra chains. Know how to sharpen chains, because you're going to hit stuff. And after a flood, after a tornado, a lot of the wood, a lot of the down trees, all the stuff you're dealing, they got mud in them, they got dirt in them. It just wrecks chains, and you're going to spend a lot of time sharpening chains. So you need to know how to do that, and you need to have extra chains. You hit something, you damage a chain, maybe you can't get them. That was something we ran into in Hurricane Helene. People even 50 to 100 miles away from where the impacted area was, a lot of the saw shops were sold out of tons of stuff because people were coming in buying it because they didn't have it. That's an important thing. Throw an extra chainsaw bar in there as well, because maybe you don't have two chainsaws. If you can have a couple of chainsaws, that's always great, because if you get a saw stuck, you can use another saw to usually get it unstuck. But if you're in a situation where you don't, you can always pop the power head off the bar, throw another bar and chain on the saw, and then get yourself unstuck that way too. Keep those sorts of things in mind. Make sure you have the skills and all the tools. Make sure you've got the PPE. Make sure you got some wedges and a good wedge pounding axe, and probably some rope and maybe some rigging stuff to help you get trees off the road. You don't necessarily want to have to sit there and cut the tree that's laying across the road into firewood size pieces so you can move it. When you've got another 100 in front of you, maybe you just want to buck the log off at both ends and put a block and a tree off the side of the road and use your truck and a rope to pull the log off the road and then move on. Have the stuff to deal with vegetative debris, and have the skills to do it. Again, you may be the only one in your community that does have that stuff. I know that at prepper camp last year in Saluda, they had to put together an impromptu saw team to cut their way out of the I don't remember the name of that campground, but the campground where prepper camp occurs. That said, we have our top 5 items that you need to survive and thrive during a natural disaster: potable water, food, communications, medical, and a chainsaw to deal with vegetative debris. That's our top 5 items for surviving a natural disaster. I'm going to wrap this one up. We will pick up with the next 5 items in the next episode of the Prepping Academy podcast here with Grid Down Comms Up. Want to encourage you guys to check out preppernet.net. Join our community there. Things are a little slow at the moment, but we're kind of going through one of those lulls in the prepping world. There's not quite as many crazy things as have been going on the last few years. There's still plenty of crazy stuff. Don't get me wrong. Don't stop prepping. But it's not the one punch after another that we've seen in the past. So, I encourage you guys to keep prepping on, keep your skills polished, and stay frosty. You never know when that unexpected hurricane is going to show up, or earthquake, or whatever. I mean, we've got a massive hurricane off the coast right now that hope is not the indicator of what the rest of hurricane season is going to be like this year. Visit us there. Check me out at Grid Down Comms Up. Also, check out the Eastern Tennessee Homestead Alliance Festival, September 12th and 13th this year in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hope I get to see you there.